Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Rinkside with your hosts, Emma Miskew and myself, Ryan Steeves. Emma, how's it going? How you been lately?
Been doing well. I am in my off season still, which is what we are going to be somewhat talking about today. So that
Yeah,
I just pitch it in. I am dressed for a workout right after we do
nice.
this podcast because that is the life of an athlete. But how are you doing?
Totally. Yeah, good. Yep, I'm into reminiscent of my childhood. I'm following the boys around diamonds right now and tennis courts. And so I agree that when summer rolls around, to me, I have almost like these, PTSD memories of just in the grind of off-season training. For me, later in my hockey career, it was really, it's for you too, right now, it's part of the job. So it's not like people who just, stay fit and roll with their own schedule. It's part of the gig. And in some ways that off-season training and how you curate it and what you do and how you focus dictates your whole performance season, right?
It really does. And I mean, both a lot of winter sports have long seasons, and
Mhm.
curling is like that. And I talk about that to a lot of people because I get asked the question, like, when do you start back? When do you end? When do you start back up? How long's your off season? What does that off season look like? And since I started competing, curling has grown and curling seasons have
Yeah.
become longer. So we are on the ice competing early September, and we're one of the later teams to start. There are teams competing in July and August, and we go straight. I mean, this past year was mid-April. It looks like it's going to get potentially lengthened
Yeah.
with like the curling group expanding and growing
Right.
curling. So we only really have between like 3 and 4 months of an off season. And
Wow.
that off season can look quite different
Yeah.
for different athletes depending on injuries, whether
Mhm.
you have to rehab them, what type of strength workouts you want to do. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today because how long
Mhm.
was your off season when you were competing and what did you get accomplished and what were you trying to get accomplished in that time?
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to flag, right? If as you're an athlete or your parents have an athlete and you're mapping out an off season, a 4 month off season was pretty much the hockey one. You're looking at sort of April, May to September, right? And it's anything but an off season. That's the funny part of it, especially now for kids and young athletes. It's anything but an off season. I know it's an off competition season, but yeah, it's a 4 month season, and so you have to build in rest. And then at the rest is opportunity, right? It's opportunity to try to get better in the areas where you think you might be lacking. And I know for hockey, one thing that constantly comes up is skating. And we have a great guest on today, Greg Pollock from Gladiator Training here in Ottawa. And this is a question I want to ask him. And I love the question because I get asked this all the time from hockey parents, and it's something that I dealt with when I was playing. How do I get faster? Right? Do I have to skate to get faster? Do I have to train to get faster? Do I have to rest? Do I have to do yoga? It's a really multifaceted issue to tackle. And so, yeah, my back to your question though, Emma, it's good. I mean, it's about a 4 month off season, and then by the time you build in rest, recovery, all that, it's really like a 3 month training cycle.
Yeah.
And then, as you know too, as competition is right around the corner, you're not training the same way as you may have, in month one of off season, right?
No, and I think that's important too
Mm.
because lifting super heavy right
Right.
before going back on ice after a break could you could risk injury that way.
Sure.
You want to be in optimal shape but not crushed. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you want to still be able to use your body the way that feels normal. I know for curling it's a finesse sport.
Yep.
And it's not. There is a level of intensity when it comes to sweeping, and then you need to have an explosive leg drive. But then everything other than those two things, you have to feel. So even if you're throwing a hit, but with a little bit less speed on it, that was called, you have to be aware of how hard you're kicking out. Because if you kick out as hard as you can, that's
Mm.
not going to be, you're not going to make the shot. It's just
Right.
not going to work out. So that finesse part actually makes the off season training so important because during the season, you have to be very, very careful how much you crush your legs. Because
Yeah.
if you crush your legs to the point of soreness, you are not going to be able to feel that leg drive in practice. And those practice reps are so important for when you go to the game to be able
Mm.
to feel those, like what that feels like. You're trying to hit kind of a number in your head. And when your
Right.
legs are crushed, I can tell you, you don't feel anything. you're you're
Totally.
like you're out going through the motions, and
Yeah.
practice is definitely the most important. So those couple months, I'd say the recovery that you talked about is the first and foremost. So a little bit of rest at the end of the
Yeah.
season. You're still working out, you're still lifting, but you're not trying to break like the barrier in terms of like crushing all your goals and everything. And
Yeah.
then as soon as that month's done, you hit it, but we only have like 2 months
Right.
before we're back onto part-time training. So
Yeah.
it's not a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, right? There's the physical side of it, but then there's you talk about curling being a finesse sport. There is the touch that you want to maintain, right? And that goes for most sports where there's that fine element, in hockey, basketball, football, those, the little fine motor skill things that you want to just keep sharp and find ways to improve. So that's different too, right? I mean, you're talking about practicing, keeping that fine touch finesse, active during your off season as well, I imagine. And,
Or thinking
um,
about it. That's kind of a
yeah.
mental thing because you can't really
Yeah.
practice or replicate without ice.
Are you throwing? Are you actually on the ice in your off season? I didn't
Not
ask you that.
not a lot. So there are areas in the world and in Canada that do have ice during the summer, but
Mhm.
most of Ontario does not have ice, like curling ice. It's too
Yep.
expensive to keep the facilities up and running when it gets to be as hot as it is right now outside.
Mhm.
So most of the clubs do shut down between like start of May at the latest,
Okay.
and then you'll start to see them open like mid-July to August and
Okay.
onwards. And just to give like the facilities, the ice makers a break. And I think that break is
Mhm.
actually really good
Mhm.
to a point. But I find the start of the season, having not been on ice
Yep.
for 4 months, can actually be like hard on the joints because you're all of a sudden doing all these
Yep.
motions that you haven't done in 4 months.
Yeah.
So we do try to ease our way into it. It's not like, oh, we have a competition next week. We just got ice. We're going to go onto the ice every day. Like we try to get out on the ice in August,
Mhm.
even just intermittently to kind of like get our bodies used to that so that when we do go into full training, we're not hurting.
Right.
And it's just a temporary thing. Like the start of every season, I'm just a little bit sore. I'm just not totally comfortable. And then as soon as we're into the swing of things, like a couple weeks later, I'm totally fine.
Yeah.
But it is difficult at the start of the year to navigate whether like that's good, that's well spent time, or
Mhm.
if we should be lifting more. Like how do you how
Yeah.
do you make that decision?
Yeah. I know it seems ever complex, right? It's this chemical process or this thing that we have to unlock to get the most out of athletes, but also to keep them as fit as possible to have the best outcomes. And that's something our next guest will talk about too, which is in-season training, right? It's sort of the forgotten element of the training curve for athletes is you can and should be training in seasons. It's just a little different, right? And the focus has to be different. And that's why experts are so key to consult with and to work with and to partner with, which I know you do, Emma.
Mhm.
And yeah, so it really is about identifying the goals, the purpose, the reasons for that training segment, whether it's that off-season training segment or in season, and then what the goals are. And each sport is of course going to have different goals, and each type of player is going to have different goals.
Yeah, and it was like we talked about in our last
Yeah.
podcast too about the asymmetry in sport. A lot of these trainers' jobs is trying to help balance those asymmetries a little bit
Yeah.
to prevent injury. So trying
Exactly.
to, I find like every time I go and run all out sprints, one leg feels different than the other
Mhm.
because I play in an asymmetrical sport.
Hmm.
they are not balanced. And so one leg is working harder than the other from a muscular perspective all the
Yeah.
time to keep up. So I found that
Hmm.
like early this year, and I was like, it's still happening, but it's just part of the sport. So it's all about trying to take what the experts say
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
do our best with trying to like balance those
Yeah.
asymmetries and imbalances. And like, I'm lucky I don't have any injuries, knock on wood, but a lot of curlers, because of the asymmetry, do have recurring injuries that for the first month of the off season, the primary goal is to address that injury and get these athletes as close to back to normal as possible prior to adding a ton of weight on a bar.
Right.
And that reduces your time even further. So
Hmm. Hmm.
you can kind of do both, but it becomes a little bit challenging.
Yeah. One thing before we let our guest on and hear from him, one thing I wanted to know was, do do you, Rachel, Tracy, Sarah, do you all train the same way? You know, like when you break it down, a hockey player, they relatively train the same way, right? The objectives are pretty similar. They're pretty aligned. Does a 4-person team or even a 5-person team train the same way?
So we have common goals, and those common goals involve being as strong as we can from a sweeping perspective, and then leg drive and that balance flexibility element. But every person has different strengths and weaknesses,
Mhm.
body type, um, and imbalances, even though we play the same sport. Like none of our slides look the same
Mhm.
visually. Like we
Mhm.
all are sliding and we try to slide down the same line and do the same thing,
Right.
but we physically are not the same people.
Mhm.
For example, like Sarah and I are similar height. Like I'm a little bit taller than her, but we're very
Mhm.
similar height. And I
Mhm.
have like really long legs. And
Mhm.
so my legs are probably like at least 6 inches longer than her legs. It's just proportionally we are
Mhm.
built differently that way.
Mhm.
So with that, we have different things we need to work on. So we get assessments done
Right.
that show strengths and weaknesses. And then those programs are catered towards, in general, being stronger, in general, being having good core strength, because that's really important for curling to be a better sweeper. And then on top of that, our trainers usually provide some sort of program to try to tackle those imbalances
Right.
and those weaknesses. And those will look different athlete to athlete, depending on what you're working on, the position that you're playing, and
Right.
those assessment results.
Right. Well, as promised, we've got our experts in the hopper here. We're really excited to welcome Greg Pollock from Gladiator Strength and Conditioning. Greg is doing amazing things in our Ottawa community. Greg actually runs the Gladiator Strength and Conditioning with his 2 sons, Ben and Sam, who are training athletes, as I said, across many disciplines, many different experience levels from young kids. It's pretty fun to go into their gym and see young athletes learning lifts and learning how to navigate a gym and the importance of strength training. So, Greg, thank you so much for joining Emma and I today, and welcome to Rinkside.
Oh, really appreciate you guys having me on. Very honored
Mm,
and very excited to have a little chat about training and sports.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This is your discipline. You're the pro here.
Yeah.
Can you let's plug Gladiator for a minute. Maybe you can tell everybody if they don't already know, and they're probably already training there, what Gladiator's all about and what you're doing over there.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, yeah, Gladiator Strength and Conditioning. I've been actually in strength and conditioning training athletes for about 40 years now, and very lucky to learn from some of the better strength coaches in the world. So always picking up new ideas and training techniques and training methods.
Mm,
Um, we have 2 locations now. We've got one in Orleans and we've got one in South Bank and train mostly hockey players, a lot of hockey players. But I do train, other athletes as
mm,
well, track athletes, lacrosse, basketball, volleyball, football, baseball. So
mm.
we just had a kid commit to D1 baseball, so we're really excited. He plays on the junior national team. So
Wow.
a little bit of different sports, but the main focus is on hockey. So
Yeah.
a lot of good history with the hockey as well too. So a lot of guys playing pro, drafted to the NHL. All the different levels, major, junior, NCAA. And it all starts with a good foundation to what we're
Right.
probably going to be talking a bit about
Yeah.
starting at the younger ages and whatnot. And
Yeah,
so,
one thing that I noticed, Greg, in your gym and in your certainly on your online background and profile here is your influence of the martial arts, I suppose. Um, Maybe you can talk. How has that influenced your training methods and discipline around just training athletes and how to how to navigate that?
yes, well, thank you so much for bringing that up because
Mm.
I really owe a lot of the success to today to the martial arts, but
Mm.
particularly John Tarian, Hanshi John Tarian, who's the founder of Tarian Jiu Jitsu and Kickboxing. And back about 20 plus years ago, I was driving down Bank Street, and I'll make this quick. And
Mm.
something told me to pull in. I saw the Tarian Jiu Jitsu sign, and I don't know what it was, but I just made that turn into the parking lot. And I went in and I met Hanshi John Tarian, and he introduced me to his dojo, told me a bit about it. And Jean-Yves Theriault, the 23-time world kickboxing champ, was in
Yeah.
there as well as his partner. And I was like, wow, these were heroes of mine growing up. And I joined on the spot. And then,
Cool.
you kind of fast forward after, as you said, how does the martial arts influence you? Well,
Mm.
especially the coaching, I was in awe of the senseis, the way they broke movements down, the way they
Mm.
pieced everything together. You were doing some very minuscule movement over and over
Mm.
again, and you're like, why am I doing this? And then all of a sudden, you put all of those little movements together and you have a hip throw, or you have a
Mm.
combination of punches and kicks. But you have to go through that tedious process of breaking the movements down and repetition, repetition. It's like when in hockey, when they have to keep skating the circles and doing the
Right.
same drills over and over again. There's a reason for that. The more you do it, the better. But it really enhanced my coaching skills. And Terran Jiu Jitsu was world renowned as well too. So they had the quality
Mm.
instructor. They knew how to present themselves. They knew how to communicate. Which I feel is super important in coaching as well too. You can have a lot of knowledge, but if you can't communicate that and get
Yeah.
your clients or your students to do the stuff that you want them to do, then your information becomes useless. So I learned
Mm.
so much from Tarian Jiu-Jitsu, and also John Tarian was the one who gave me my kind of start in and provided me with a space to start training athletes. So
That's great.
yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because
Yeah.
I always
Good.
try and find a way to thank him, and now this is actually part
There
of
you
the
go.
question. So yeah, yeah.
So, how did you transition then into coaching from there? Like, how did that come about? What motivated you to want to help others achieve
Mm.
their physical goals?
Yes, yeah. Well, that's another it's another one. And Ryan knows I can go on here a little bit about stories, but the story that I like to tell and how I kind of got into coaching was when I was 19 years old. So back in 1984, and I'll try and make this quick, but my best friend was playing for the Peterborough Petes at the time, and I was into lifting since I was about 13 years old. So he knew that I was strong and into lifting and probably knew something about lifting, and he was going into his NHL draft year. And his agent was telling him, listen, you're going to have to get a little bigger and stronger. You got to hit the gym. But at the time, there wasn't a lot of strength training going on for hockey players back then. So he approached me and asked me to train him. And I brought him to the Ottawa Athletic Club at the time. It was open. And, I started training him on what I knew. I was lucky. I was learning already from professional athletes and strength coaches, not realizing the knowledge that I accumulated, but it was actually very good knowledge. He ended up putting 22 pounds of muscle on him, and he went into his draft year. He scored 43 goals and he had 90 assists, which is a record in Peterborough to
Jeez.
this day. And he was drafted 64th overall by the Penguins. So that kind of marked my initial start of coaching. He started bringing me some 67 players that he knew from the area and stuff. And I started doing it a bit on the side,
Yeah.
and not as a full-time job. And that's really how I broke in. And then later on, I started training some more high-end hockey players again, Zenon Konopka, who Ryan would know, and that sort of
Mm.
age group. And then my sons started getting into hockey, and I wanted to start making a difference in minor hockey, not just the athlete
Mm.
that already got there. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
could go on probably a lot longer, but that's it in a nutshell.
this
That.
well this
But
this is totally unscripted, and I'm happy we've checked off two of your main speaking points without even asking you.
Yes, yes,
Thank you.
Um,
yes. I
one of
owe
the
my friend Mark there everything. He put the confidence in me, so
That's great.
yeah.
One of the things making a difference in minor hockey, Greg. I mean, you just have to step into your gym and look around to see all of the athletes who you're great at putting on the walls and highlighting their successes. Um, and it's, men, women, young boys, young girls. I mean, you're helping them. You're a partner of theirs, helping them advance to different levels in their careers. And, the people who are lucky enough to have either parents or others guiding them to these places is fantastic, and it's a key part of success now, especially now. Maybe if you were 20 years ago, I know when I was going through it, it was something that if you were just kind of lucky enough to get involved with, it was great. Most people weren't even doing it. Some were doing it, but now it's mainstream. So, one of the things that I wanted to
Oh,
ask you about, Greg, and maybe a bit of a let's take a step back for a second. When I walk into your gym and I see, like a 12-year-old working out alongside an 18-year-old, and they're doing relatively the same workout, um, I was amazed by that. But now it all makes sense because I've heard you talk about senseis and being in a dojo and seeing it broken down on a movement by
yes.
movement thing. And so that's always the question I got when I sent my son to Gladiator and I walk in and he's learning deadlifts. The criticism for people to me was, well, why would you let your son do lifts like that? And I want you to now answer that because I'm tired of answering it myself.
Yes.
And I think your answers are great. So
Yes.
maybe you can
Yeah.
help us
No,
break down how 12-year-olds and 18-year-olds and complex movements can all just sort of get along in one facility.
that's right. Yeah. No. And another fantastic question. And I have to learn on how to message that for that very reason, right? And the martial arts again. You don't go from white belt to black belt. It's a process. You
Right.
have to go to your yellow, then your orange, right? And the same goes for young hockey players, young athletes in the gym. It's an individual progression. So if you're not ready to move to the next level, so we would screen your son and see if
Uh-huh.
he's able of doing certain movements. If he's able to keep his core tight, his back, his posture, all that, then we would
Uh-huh.
have him try and do that hinge deadlift, right, with
Right.
very light weight, just and put him time under tension to see if he can hold that. And
Right.
then obviously he was more than capable to do that after a period of time. And
Uh-huh.
so then we would add just a little more weight, a little more weight. Obviously, at the young ages, we don't want them doing a one rep max. It's about maintaining that posture, that technique and form. And
Uh-huh.
I really believe in the actual deadlift if done properly. It's
Uh-huh.
a really good overall strength building movement if done
Uh-huh.
properly. I
That
wouldn't
was just an
recommend that
example.
young kids, yeah, that they do it
Yeah.
on their own. And the nice thing is, like you said, he can be looking at that 18-year-old and saying, "This is where I want to be in a few years. Look how hard he's training." And
Uh-huh.
look how disciplined he is. He's not
Uh-huh.
horsing around in the gym. He's not laughing. He's not goofing around. They're enjoying themselves. Of course, we want to
Yeah.
create that culture to enjoy, but we also it's also a culture of education as well too. And
Yeah.
some kids at the younger ages they're not capable of doing a deadlift, so we don't make them do a deadlift. We would never put
Yeah.
a young athlete in a compromised
Right.
position where they can hurt
Right.
themselves. We're here to prevent the injuries and rehab the injuries, not to create them. So that's very important to know too. It's all,
It's
yeah,
Yeah, no, it's interesting because it's like if done properly is one of those things. It's so important, but there's a lot of not only kids, but any age group where if you are not taught the proper way of doing an exercise and then you want to do it anyways because you see other people doing it and you start doing it incorrectly, then you're going to continue to do it incorrectly. And that's
that's
when
right.
injuries come up. So
Exactly.
I was squatting kind of not completely using my core for a while, but I was like, I'm strong. So I load up the bar. And then all of a sudden, back goes out. And I restarted at like in my late 20s with relearning a movement that I had been doing for so long because I did
Uh-huh.
it wrong and that's detrimental. So how do you like
Yes.
talk to kids or even like anyone that way and be like, I know it looks like you're not lifting anything. And yes, you are strong, but we are teaching you the correct way to lift to lift this for this movement, or we're teaching you the correct and safe way to engage the right muscles. So how do you go about that? Because I know mentally for me, I was like, what do you mean I'm just lifting a bar? Like I can squat
That's right.
more than the bar, but
Uh-huh.
it helped me to relearn it. So how would you go about that?
Yeah. Well, you guys, these are fantastic questions. I'm so glad that you're asking them. Um, and that's a super important one too, because you do get the odd young athlete that like, yes, this is kind of stupid. Why am I doing it? But we do our best to try and explain the process, right? And like I said, they don't immediately do deadlifts. We prep them to get to that point, and we explain to them. And the nice thing is too is that even though my sons think it's silly, I video a lot, right? So I
Uh-huh.
have video of that guy that they're watching at 18, 19 when he's 11 or 12. And I say,
Oh, I
look,
love
you
that.
see, he was drafted to the NHL. He's doing the same thing you are now. He thought it was kind of silly back then, just using the bar or very lightweight, but it's so important so you don't get injured. We're here, so we're prepping you to get to there, but it's a process, and
Right.
another important aspect too is you have to know your client. So you have to screen your young athlete. If you don't know that they're doing that, you might have done that squat incorrectly because you have tight hips, right? So you might be shifting to one side. If we don't fix that tight hip or that sore knee or that bad shoulder, and we just put you through a cookie cutter type workout and have you squat or have you press, not realizing that we're furthering your chances of getting injured. So we have the structural balance period where we get both sides equally strong. We work the hips, we work the shoulders, all these little tedious little movements with bands and light weights that, it might not be super fun for them, but we make them understand that if you want to be able to lift the heavier weights later on, you have to go through this process. And
Yes.
Yeah.
again, it's that injury prevention that's so important, and the knowledge. There's so much technology now that my sons have brought to the game that we test for everything. So we have the equipment and the technology to test our athletes on a regular basis. So we'll
Uh-huh.
know if they're getting a little weaker, or if they're getting faster, if they're getting slower, all that stuff, because it's
That's
all
cool.
being tested. There's no guessing.
Hmm. Yeah, one of the things that really stands out for me, Greg, as I hear you talk, is especially for the younger athletes that are coming through your doors, and this is their introduction to strength and conditioning, is establishing that really nice relationship with training, right? Showing them all the benefits, right, and teaching them the habits to sort of set them up for success. Whether they leave your gym after a year and never come back, you were the one that introduced them to that and did it in a really responsible way. So that's one of the things that impresses me most about your gym. And of course, you're not the only one out there doing it that way. There's many that are really trying to have that impact on families and young kids, but you do it well, and I've seen it, and so kudos to you on that. So one
Yeah.
thing that we've promised our thousands and thousands of listeners who are dying to hear about this, and I know they are because I hear about it all the time.
Yes.
And this is a topic that I know people have looked at Rinkside to cover, and that is, can you give us like the reasonable explanation here for how does an athlete at 12, 15 really look at that 4 month off season? Can you help us break down? Because most athletes are kind of trying to get faster and stronger and more flexible and all those core elements. But
Yes.
so like season ends day one and you're looking ahead to September 1st. If you're sort of that, summer off season, traditional off season, what's the approach? What should families be looking for?
Yes. Yeah. So the season ends. You've had a long, hard season. There's a lot of stress mentally and physically on the body. There could be little weaknesses and imbalances. Well, there will be weaknesses and imbalances, and there'll be tightness.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, we tell the kids, take 2 weeks off. No skating, no nothing. Just relax, be a kid. Stay away from everything that has to do with your sport. Just for 2 weeks, you gotta give your body a bit of a break. And then,
Totally.
we would do a screening of the body, right, when they come in. And then like I said, we would put them through that structural balance phase, where we work out all the weaknesses in the body, strengthen them, and get more mobility, all that type of stuff. So not a lot of weight involved, but, some light dumbbells and stuff. So, you got to really plan to be training throughout the whole summer, not just certain parts, as you move on, right? Because each phase leads into the next. And then after we finish the structural balance phase, then we'd move into more of a strength phase where you're building your strength, you're putting your your body under, under tension, time under tension more. So it's a little more stressful on the muscles and the nervous system. So we encourage that they don't do really much else other than that as well. So if they're doing like a squat and they're lowering the bar 6 to 7 seconds, that's very taxing on the body. So if they go out and they start running and doing track, then they could potentially, have an injury because it's just too much on the body. They'd be too tired
Right.
to perform, right? So there's that little period of that strength building. Then we move into more of an explosive phase. Keep building the strength, keep maintaining the structural balance, then the explosive, and then into the more heavy conditioning. The plyometrics, the sled pushes, the farmer's walks, that type of thing. So the idea is to peak in those 4 months. At the end of those 4 months, you want to be peaking for the fall, right? So you don't want to peak too
Yeah.
soon because then your body starts getting, tired again. So if you're running all summer, that's a lot of stress on the body. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think the science proves that.
No.
I think the science proves that it's not good for an athlete. There's
Yeah.
phases you have to go through, and you have to follow them. Now, young kids, they're playing different sports and stuff. That's great. I don't discourage that at all. Motor skill development and other sports, I think, are fantastic. You just have to be aware of your kid, if of your child, your young athlete, I should say, if they're getting too tired or too mentally tired. That's all. But the more they can do, the better. And usually the elite athletes, they're hungry. You actually have to try and pull them back because they want to go, 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 which is a nice thing as well too. So that's kind of a brief description
Yeah.
of our off season.
That's good.
Yeah. So how do you then transition athletes into the on season? And the ones that you're still working with, what does the change in their program and protocol look like, given that they're back into their sport full time? And how do you maintain that strength as best you can while they are back in competition?
Yes, yeah, another fantastic question too, because a lot of people think that no, they can't be doing that anymore because it's going to get them too tired and they won't be able to perform. That's true if they're not following a proper program. Again, everything's based on if your programming is right. And we switched to our in-season training, and we encourage the kids to come in, a few times a week, just to maintain that structural balance, to prevent the injuries, to maintain their strength. So we don't go super heavy in the season, but we want to lift enough that we're maintaining strength and speed. And we actually have devices that we can put on our bars and stuff to make sure that they're hitting that strength and speed zone. So we are not guessing again. We know that they're maintaining or building strength, and they're moving the bar fast enough that they're building speed as well too. So what we're trying to do the most is keep that fast twitch muscle fiber activated, and teaching the brain to send those signals to the muscles about moving fast. So we do a lot of different lifts and movements to train the brain that way, to send those signals, fast. You got to move fast, keep that speed, and keep that activation. As a coach, Ryan, I'm sure you've seen, the team might be on a tournament, and then the first period, they're lifeless. It takes them a whole period to get going because they've either been in the car for 5 hours and they're eating fast food
Drives me
and then,
nuts, Greg. We always lose game one.
so they're not activated, right? And then
Yeah.
the second period, they start picking up a bit,
That's right.
but the nutrition and the activation is so important, right? And so that's what we really focus on during the season, and we'll tailor it towards their season. So if Ryan sends his son in before a game, we're not going to do a 5-second down eccentric squat. We're going to get him moving fast, teaching his body to respond to speed, So
That's a really cool thing that I appreciated, because when I was doing this, I had a local gym in the small town where I lived, and I would go in, and it was all about loading bars, and it was really old school. I shouldn't even say old school, outdated maybe. And one of the things that I really liked about your programming is you have a very consistent mobility day, and the kids actually know this and they look forward to it. Yeah, I think it's because they don't do much. They don't do much of it. And then the other one, I'm not sure if you're still doing it, Greg, is the breathing.
yes,
The breathing exercises. This fascinated me, teaching kids how to breathe, and they loved it. You would shut the lights off, and I don't want to divulge too much of your trade secrets here, but but I think, to be introducing concepts like mobility day, breathing is, to somebody who's more old school, sounds kind of hokey, but I can say with experience, it is revolutionary and way ahead of the game. And so maybe, you know, how did you think to do these things and introduce these concepts to athletes that have probably never been exposed to this kind of thing?
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah. You know, one thing I found, I'll get to the breathing in a second because that's another story, right? But
Mhm.
but the mobility, I just find it's so important, right? And you know, you have to incorporate it into the actual workouts, and then you actually have a mobility day. Because if you do, you know, and you know, early on in my career, you know, I especially with the adults, I'd say, okay, now you're finished your workout, go over and do your stretching on your own, and most of them would just leave, you know, because either time or you know I don't have time or I don't
Yeah.
want to do it. And for the younger kids, it's not as fun for them, right?
Yeah.
Until you get them in those habits of actually doing it. So we actually incorporate it right in there, and now they actually enjoy it. And the breathing thing is quite fascinating too because
Mhm.
you know I'm a big practitioner myself, and I combine that and with the cold plunges, right? So
Mhm.
I know Wyatt's an expert at that too. He went into Lake Louise, which is amazing because that is
Yeah.
glacier water, super cold.
Brutal.
But it's training your mind to deal with stresses, right? So
Yeah.
um, with the breathing, though, you know, we get them to de-stress, teach them how to breathe and proper breathing patterns. Because when you're under stress on the ice or whatever your sport is, you start panic breathing and you get more tired. But if you can
Mhm.
learn how to control your breathing better, then you're going to last, you know, at full output longer during
Yeah.
doing your sport, you know. So you have to learn how to conserve your oxygen and learn how to breathe properly rather than panic breathe, you know. And
Mhm.
you know, a simple thing like when you breathe in, your stomach doesn't go in because then your lungs retract because the
Yeah.
stomach is pushing the lungs up. You're not getting the so we teach them how to do that. It's the Wim Hof breathing theory is excellent, and but it's something you have to practice as well, and you actually feel really good when you do it. You
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
fantastic. It gives you a little tingly feeling all over your body,
Mhm.
and it's very good for the kids too when they really get into it. Like they de-stress a bit, and it's a nice way of you know ending their workout. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very cool. Maybe one last little plug here, Greg, before we get you out. You mentioned at the top where I think most people who are familiar with you and your program know that you're down on South Bank, but you're out in Orleans at the new Bloom Hockey Training Center, which I think is the old large furniture store there on St. Joseph, on the sort of the west end of St. Joseph in Orleans.
Yes.
What are you doing at that facility? How's that been? How's that new space looking?
It's going great. You know, I kind of lucked out again there, getting to know Rick Dorval, former OHL coach, and his wife. His wife trained with me for a bit, and her son did. And Rick would always send me some clients, and they had this
Yeah.
idea that they wanted to open up a skills and shooting facility on synthetic ice, and they brought in, you know. The same ice that they used on Cirque du Soleil, so the technology is fantastic. It's not the same as you know, that it looks like
Mm.
they're skating in quicksand. This looks like they're
Yeah.
skating on ice. The puck moves. Anyhow, they opened up this big facility out there, and they wanted a gym component. So they gave me
Mm.
a nice big space, so it's a little bigger than the one on Bank Street, and I geared
Mm.
it a little more towards being able to train teams more. You know, there's
Mm.
30 yards of turf. There's a lot more room in there, so to be able to train a whole team, it'll be a lot nicer, a lot bigger space,
Mm.
and it's going very well.
Great.
You know, I'm attracting people from the east, and it's really picking up. And again, the word of mouth. You know, so once they
Yeah.
hear that Gladiator is out there, and some of the
Nice.
kids that are training are telling their friends, so it's picking up nicely. But nice, beautiful space to
Cool.
operate in, and feeling really grateful to have that opportunity as well too.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you, Ben and Sam. I know you guys are busy. Nobody works harder than you guys in the whole year, but especially in the off seasons for hockey and some of these other sports. So, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, we love
Yeah.
it, you know, and that was one of the things too. You know, that I learned growing up as well. If you don't love what you're doing, then you may as well not be in it, right? And especially when you're working with other people like we're doing, if they'll be able to tell if we're not into it, if we don't care about our
Yeah.
clients. So we all really enjoy it, and it's like a dream come true for me and for my sons as well too. So,
So
Mm.
nice to have people who actually care about athletes, and it's not
Yeah.
just a job. So thank you for your contribution to young athletes and our community.
Appreciate what you're doing for our community, and thanks for being on Rinkside today.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and I hope I didn't babble on with the stories too much. So
We love it. Wouldn't have it any other way, Greg.